Right. Hello, everyone. This is the editor group kickoff meeting for 14.2 Milestone, and it is July 15th. And yeah, let's jump right into it. I linked to the planning issue. We've all been asynchronously working on that, and this has been the first planning milestone planning effort that I've done with David, and I've really appreciated all your feedback and David's help on it. So I think it went really well. I think we have a really great milestone ahead of us. And I think what I'm most delighted to see is some more focused work and more intentionally focused work on our other categories like the source editor and content editor, or non-category categories, our underlying editing components. But if you have any upcoming time off, I think that it's all pretty much documented in the planning issue. You don't necessarily need to put it in the agenda, but I will be taking some time off in August. We can leave that read only. So I do want to highlight some stuff that we did on the last milestone. 14.1 was a great milestone because we could return from focusing for the past quarter on settings and navigation work, and we delivered some really impactful and meaningful changes there, and we could shift our focus back to our other categories in 14.1. We shipped a lot of great work, and there's some more that may or may not ship, so if there's anything I missed, feel free to add it to the highlights, or if there's anything that wasn't necessarily a feature that we shipped that you want to highlight as a success from the last milestone, feel free to do so in the agenda or call it out here. We also have a retro where we can talk about this more, but the milestone 14.1 had a lot of great improvements and iterations to the content editor. Himanshu and Enrique paired up on adding strike-through formatting, horizontal rules. Those came really quickly. Inserting images was a huge one, something that in our feedback issue, probably 50% of the people that were trying out the content editor in the wiki said, hey, how do I upload an image? Or this will be great once I can upload an image, things like that. And the other 50% said this will be great when I can work with tables. And guess what? We also now have the ability to not only render the tables, but create new tables. And that is more than we committed to shipping in 14.1. So hats off to Enrique and Himanshu for that. Dennis, I don't know if you want to highlight that huge performance improvement that you shipped this milestone as well. I think it was something like 60% faster.
70 plus.
70 plus. Well, thank you.
It was 60 when I tested it locally, but I've tested on the double, like on the twice as small blob as it is in production. And in the production it's 70 plus. Yeah, it was absolutely amazing result in terms of numbers. Not so exciting in terms of technical implementation, because it actually it has been achieved with a very simple fix. The thing is that in order to get to that fix, I had to do a lot of research and analysis, and we have like huge comments in the relevant issue on that actually led to that solution that we have implemented. But the good thing is that technically now we have a solution that is super simple and is it is simple enough to be generalized and possibly applied to other places in the product to improve loading performance of different views. Because it's very simple, it's just CSS. It's super lightweight, and it can bring dramatic changes to page loading of the views where we output a large amount of data in HTML.
And yeah, I guess just to be more specific, we're talking about the performance here in the view file source view that you were improving, right? And so we can apply that elsewhere in
So
other
the original issue was that we have a specific we monitor a specific route in the product with a very, very large view, so file in a repository with more than 32 lines of code, I guess. That's like, first of all, please never ever create files with more than 32 lines of code. But if you have to, that might bring a lot of performance issues, and that's what we were trying to fix. When I was pinged on the issue, we had around 57 seconds LCP. So and that was a bit over our like above the threshold for severity 2 issues, that is maximum 9 seconds. So 57 was a bit too much, and that's what we were trying to fix. And after that fix, we ended up with 4.6 or 4.9 seconds LCP for the same file.
That's awesome. And I mean, I think as it relates to shifting the focus to something like the single file editor and web IDE, obviously performance and speed and getting access to your source files is super important. So anything we can do to render and display the code as fast as possible is a win for everybody.
There's just one thing, just one simple remark. This fix won't be needed for the source editor once the blob viewer outputs content in source with using source editor. The fix won't be needed because performance is in the core of source editor, and it technically, even if you feed it a file with 32,000 lines of code, it won't be processing more than the lines you actually show in the editor, so like 50 lines or something like this, and it will just reuse the things. So we won't be affected by that in the editor itself. It was really just the viewer that was affected.
Well, that's great context and still amazing work. So, and speaking of updates, we have updated the Monaco version, which came with some fixes specifically around mobile support, which has upgraded our usability from completely broken to slightly less awful. So we can all celebrate that our mobile support in our editors it's actually
very usable now, very well usable now. I've tried it yesterday, and I've been able to do a lot of things there, and like create a file, edit the file, push a commit, and technically, I didn't experience any issue with the mobile support now.
That's great. So it's great that the Monaco team was focused on that. It's great that we could apply those fixes in this milestone. Even though it wasn't our primary focus, and it's certainly not our primary use case, it's great to have that kind of support. So let's talk a little bit about 14.2. We've been chatting about this in the planning issue, but to elaborate a little bit on the strategy and how it relates to the next few milestones as well. This milestone, we will be focusing a little bit on the settings and navigation work. Fareen's going to be working on the back end to round out the sidebar refactor, in particular the group sidebar, which didn't get completed as part of 14.0, but that's completely transparent to the end user. It looks the same because Dennis, you applied the style to both the old code base and the new code base. So in the back end, Fareen will be updating the group sidebar to keep consistent and just clean up that part of the code base. I think that's going to be super valuable for long-term maintenance and for consistency. So I'm excited that we can prioritize that work. As far as features that we are going to be able to see, or end users will be able to see. Content editor's got quite a bit of work planned. There's some documentation and sort of maybe housekeeping work, you could say, but there are a few features that we have planned for 14.2, including the ability to upload attachments, which will take a very similar user flow to uploading images, but it is something obviously you can do in issues and wikis. You can upload a zip file or a doc file and have it attached to the document. So we want to support that. Himanshu has a proof of concept that wasn't actually requested to be prioritized, but it seemed like it was just too anxious to get the ability to upload and insert block elements inside a table cell. So this would include like unordered lists or more nested tables. A great Slack thread where he showed table within a table within a table within a table within a table. It's great to see that support. We might be able to pull that POC across the line. If not, we'll get that in soon. But that is that's like the next evolution of our editing support for tables, and I think would be really valuable. I'm not going to stop you all from working on that, but just know it's maybe a stretch goal. One of the things, two other things we do want to do in 14.2 on the content editor would be introducing an MVC for a formatting menu. And Enrique, you can elaborate too on the comment that you left in the issue, but the ability in here is to have contextual UI around in the editor to bring functions out of the toolbar or provide additional functions that aren't available in the toolbar. In this case, the MVC is really bringing like bold, italic, strike through, code formatting, the text type formatting tools closer to your cursor, and when you highlight text, show those above in a floating bubble. And then from there, we'll expand into other contextual UI for things like editing table rows or changing the properties of an image or replacing an image. But Enrique, you had a really well-researched comment. I don't know if you want to maybe share with the team your findings there.
I think that you describe it in a very accurate way. The MVC now is going to be focused on basic text formatting. But then in later stages, we have to work on designing or defining what user experience we want to provide for a specific content types in terms of contextual editing. For example, in the case of images and tables, like how do we want to provide an experience for adding, in the case of tables, new columns or removing rows. In the case of images, how we want to provide editing tools to change the URL or the alternative text. So at this stage, we're just providing like this basic menu. We are gonna work, I guess, like Michael and I are gonna work on defining the upcoming experiences, and then we're gonna define, like a lot of things are gonna have like custom implementations for those components. So that could be like the plan for the upcoming milestones.
Yeah. And I think starting small would be great. We did get a lot of feedback around the toolbar and on longer documents, how disruptive it can be if it scrolls off the page or just moving up and down. As we look towards some of the North Star explorations that Michael's been doing about the look and feel of the edit view itself, we're trying to give that editing view a little more room. It's just going to get more and more real estate on your screen for you to be going back up and down between the toolbar. And until we get to the point where we're confident we are shipping a block style editor or being able to affect areas of the content in line with the content itself, the toolbar is here to stay. We should make it easier to get to some of the more common formatting things. So I think this is a great, valuable MVC to get into 14.2. Hopefully it is something that we can learn from and extend in a custom direction down the road. And speaking of MVCs, he is off today, but our product intern has been working on defining an MVC for embedding snippets. And so I think we'll try and at least take a stab at that in 14.2. I don't know how small we can get that or like what we will uncover along the way, but that would be a big focus for him and for me to work and iterate on that issue and try and get it executed in 14.2. And so there, the focus is really just on finding a way to bridge the gap between our two categories and take a reusable code snippet, embed it in a wiki page through the content editor so that it can stay up to date and you don't have to write a code block and then maintain that in multiple places. So it's really replacing that specific use case of like in code documentation or something, you could have a code block that's reused and that takes the shape of a snippet. There's I should have added links to all of these, but I'll go back and do that. There's an epic that I'm working on with him, and the MVC issue is something that we will, I actually have it up here. So let me add it to the agenda. Go back and add some of the other ones too. Yeah, so that's content editor for 14.2. As I mentioned, there's other things like we want to document, do some more documentation on the process of creating an extension, and I think there was some test coverage and stuff like that. Some sort of tech debt that we wanted to clear up before we move heavy into the rest of the GitLab flavored Markdown support in Q3. So now that's links. The other big piece of work in 14.2, Dennis is going to be working on the source editor toolbar MVC, and we were refining this a little bit in our backlog refinement session yesterday. Yeah. And we've kind of scoped it down nicely to encompass specifically Markdown Live Preview is the first button that will be displayed in the toolbar. This was already loosely defined in the issues, but we've defined this is exactly what we want to ship for 14.2. Basically, when the source editor opens up a Markdown file, the toolbar will become visible. And in that toolbar, we'll have a button for your Markdown Live Preview panel. So these two extensions work well together. It is a way to begin to introduce the concept of a toolbar and extensions being able to add items into the toolbar of the source editor. And from there, we can work on additional toolbar actions that need to be added to the source editor. But the Markdown Live Preview is something we're very excited about, and we've actually seen feedback in the content editor feedback issue that have reinforced our direction here for the source editor, which is that some people are more comfortable, and we knew this, writing in raw Markdown, but would appreciate a live preview on the side. So I think this is a very worthy place to invest our time, and it goes well with our overall strategy. And Chad is intimately familiar with the work involved for the side-by-side
That's
preview
me.
as well. Yep. This for historical documentation was when the group was static site editor, and it was basically me, Jean, and Chad. This was what we carved out as our initial minimally viable change for editing the handbook in a more friendly way. We said a side-by-side live preview would be a great first step. Turns out that was more challenging than expected. And as we understood the problem more and more, it was also potentially not as helpful as it needed to be. So it wasn't actually making the impact we hoped it would. So it was eventually abandoned. It's nice to see it come back though. Anything else we want to chat about in there? Content editor, source editor. Any detail you all want to share? Any questions you have about scope or concerns about not being able to ship it, all of that? Now's your time.
I have an observation about attachments in the content editor. I'm very optimistic that that we could even display video and audio attachments on this Milestone. I I think that I described in an issue before, the basics for attachment for images and file attachments, or the backend is the same across all of the attachment types. So what changes is actually what we display in the content editor. Like we are uploading something and then we have to display like an audio or a video or another type of file uh, while the loading process is happening. So what I want Himanshu and I to aim for this Milestone is like create a generalize what we did for images in 14.1, and then just like create these separate instances of that generic component for all of the file types that we want to support. Uh, so yeah, that's like my my optimistic point of view of how I want 14.2 to go.
Hey, I'm not going to hold you and Himanshu back from over delivering. It's generally been the theme over the past couple milestones. So if you can do that, that would be amazing. I think it's interesting to point out the similarities. And I guess this all points back to our back end existing endpoints for GitLab flavored Markdown. And there's commonalities there that I didn't realize. So that's great. The thing I would say is like, let's just keep it conservative and just try and ship what we want to ship. But if that becomes possible, like please include it in an MR. And if you need to refine the issues as they are to better reflect that, I'm happy to help there and reword things or close issues that aren't necessary anymore if you're just solving all in one MR, something like that. Yeah. That's great. I mean, video and audio are important tools, especially as we look towards the ability to move this into issue descriptions and epic descriptions. I think those are really effective communication tools within the wiki and in issue descriptions. So support for that as early as possible would be fantastic. I guess this is probably a good time. This is not related to the 14.2 kickoff, but more of our monthly and quarterly strategy. But I was just talking with David and Michael about this in a call, and we should discuss as a team a quarterly OKR that I proposed, which is 100% support for GitLab flavored Markdown by the end of Q3. And I want to hear about how ambitious that may be. What are the specific roadblocks, and how can we get there? How can we make a plan to get there? So we don't need to solve that in this sync call, but on the topic of outpacing my planning, as we look at the chart of remaining content types in GitLab flavored Markdown, like where are those commonalities that we can tackle 3 or 4 at a time in a milestone? Where are things that can be parallelized even further, like if somebody else could pick up a content type, or potentially where are ones that aren't actually content types but are more just like HTML representations of feedback that, or of output that comes from the API. So probably warrants a separate sync call outside the context of a kickoff, but we should try and break down the plan there so that we can try, make our best stab at getting to that OKR.
The main question there is, what do we mean by support? Because there are like several degrees of complexity in the way that we support a content type. For example, in this milestone, we achieved rendering tables and inserting a table, but we don't provide very good tools for editing, like adding columns, adding rows. So if we define, like, we could say we support GFM at the rendering level, and we display all of the possible, I don't know, like displaying in the editor all of the possible type of content that GFM supports. Or we can be a little bit more ambitious and say we want to provide, I don't know, some basic editing tools. There are well, there are content types that are very complex to edit. Let's say mermaid diagrams, plant UML diagrams. Like, they want to provide editing tools for that. So I think that it's just like trying to scope very well how we want to support each content type as part of the definition of the OKR.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think definitely some more refinement of that epic and the issues inside will help in having your input to separate the scope and separate the concerns where we can and ship MVCs. I think I'm more in line with like 100% rendering so that it can be used and it won't get confused by anything that's in any page, and it could, there's less risk of data loss and stuff like that. And then we can create follow-up issues for custom UI and custom editing controls. I do think the exception there is like where it's related to the usability of a feature, like adding rows and columns of tables. That probably I would consider in scope, but potentially not like advanced tools for editing mermaid diagrams or something like that. That's a whole other concept to think about, is when we have something that's represented by code and we want to edit it, is there a possibility to switch over to embed an instance of source editor with the contents of that code block and just use that as our editing experience, and then have a way to switch back and run the and so specifically for a mermaid diagram, the way I kind of imagine it, and Michael and I need to talk through this, and we need to make sure this is what we actually want. But my vision is like, you've got a rendered mermaid diagram, you click an edit button, and it switches over to a instance of the source editor embedded in the content editor, where you can make changes to the code, hit save, and then it re-renders the diagram in context there. That would be the ideal state, right? That's not to say that's end of Q3.
That's also what I'm inclined to do. Like not only for mermaid diagrams, but any kind of code block that is displayed in the content editor. Like if there are performance implications, I think that like for the content editor MVC, we use the built-in tool that TipTap provides to display and edit code blocks, that is highlight.js. However, I think that at some point we should replace that solution with just creating a content editor extension that embeds the source editor, right? Because it's preloaded, it won't represent like an increase in bundle size, so it's gonna load faster. It supports all of the languages that we need to support. So it's like, there are many advantages. Like that means also that we could even display divs at some point within the content editor. So I see a lot of benefits in following that direction.
That sounds great.
I think that even for the Embedding Snippets MVC, that's something that we should explore. Like I don't know if using highlight.js like the current solution for editing snippets is a right option. Probably it's like better to start replacing that with the source editor immediately.
Sounds good. I like that approach, and definitely keep pushing on that. I don't know if that needs to be scoped further to enable any of the other work, or if that's something that we can refine in the context of code blocks. I know we've created a couple issues to follow up on code blocks in particular around highlighting and formatting and consistency in how it's rendered and following the themes and stuff like that. So, in theory, I completely get what you're saying is using source editor, we kind of inherit all that work that we've done in source editor, and improve the bundle size, which makes a ton of sense. And I'm with you too. So like, as we talk about, and a problem we were very familiar with on the static site editor is, what do we do with like random bits of code that are spread throughout, like random HTML or Ruby or something like that, as we extend the use cases. If there's something that can't be parsed, is not meant to be parsed as plain text, but we don't know what to do with it because it's, you know, it's meant to be rendered partial or something like that, or for example, like it's some kind of Golem wiki shortcut or something like that, like a table of contents. Rendering that in a single block of a code block that could then be edited or just displayed as code seems like the most efficient way forward, rather than trying to build every possible custom rendering and custom UI to manage all those different instances. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Similarly, we were just discussing yesterday when we were refining the backlog for the source editor, the idea of panel widgets and what that means, and trying to plan for the introduction of a new extension type for source editor that would allow you to have entire panels of content for your extension to live in. And Dennis mentioned that there was a proof of concept a while back where the content editor was added as a source editor extension. So I feel like this is the mirror image of that conversation where we were talking just then about having the source editor, but potentially on a markdown file, like load the content editor in a panel. We could have the same thing on our side, which is on the content editor side, which is loading the source editor instance inside. And then you could have a panel in that source editor that loads the content editor, which then has an instance of source editor inside it.
Into this inception mode.
Yep. Yeah.
But just one thing, like the panel widget is not intended to be the separate extension type. It's just the widget type that any extension can add any number of panel widgets. It's just some type of information that is controlled by other extensions. It's not this separate type of extension.
Got it. Yeah, thanks for that clarification. Yeah. And as you described it, it lives outside of the editor itself. So it's really just about a bridge of communication between a panel and the source, the editor itself.
Yeah, it's like two pieces of information. There is the source editor, and there is some sort of representation of what's going on in the editor. So there is the whole point is to build this bridge between editor and the representation of its content. Technically, representation of the model of what's going on in the editor at the moment. So real-time changes, and that's the whole point is just building this bridge and bake it into source editor so that the extensions authors, if they need to create the panel widget, they wouldn't need to worry about building this bridge manually every time. So it will be just baked into the source editor, and it will be just simple API to use to add 1, 2, 3, 4, any number of panel widgets. In my proof of concept, there was also like every panel widget accepted the parameter where to render it, like above the source editor, on the left, on the right, at the bottom, like some random DOM element where this panel might live if you want to create a separate panel completely outside of the context of source editor, but still keep this bridge between editor and the panel.
Yeah, I am very interested to see what will happen when you have a panel widget that loads the content editor that has instances of the source editor inside. Should work, right? It's just going to be another instance.
It's going to work. It's like the problem is that nothing terrible will happen. An instance of the source editor creates the panel in which we have the content editor that creates another instance of the source editor in its panel. So it's just like, it's gonna look horrible, but that's that's another story.
I'm going to quote you on nothing terrible will happen, and that will be our new baseline of support.
Yeah, just remember to put small asterisk at the end of this, because nobody knows what is my definition of terrible.
True. It's all relative. Well, it's all very exciting. Just to bring it back to 14.2, I think we have an ambitious goal, but some really exciting areas to work on.
There's one other thing that I wanted to mention. This is something I discussed with Paul a while back, and you bringing up that we want to have a stretch goal to cover all of the markdown cases. Paul had a good idea for sort of the next generation of the golden master test that we use to enforce that we're rendering the right markdown, which is essentially switching from fixture specs to request specs and having the HTML hard-coded in our golden master YAML, which would also enforce that the backend doesn't regress, because now there's currently a lag. Like the backend could change something and then we won't necessarily find out about it right away or until that hits if they change the shape of the HTML in a way that we don't expect. So that's something I've been wanting to get around to, but haven't. But especially Enrique, maybe let's put that on our radar and talk about it.
Yeah, I would be more than glad to meet on priority of that. He might also did like some improvements recently.
Yeah, I think I reviewed that one.
And that was great, like to contextualize the attachment links based on projects or groups or the wikis. That's gonna be really good in the future. Like when we try to translate, to use a content editor in issues on merge requests.
I think the more we can lock down any chance of regressions with that golden master suite, the better.
All for it. Thank you for bringing that up. I didn't have the right words or approach for this, but when we were early on in defining these epics for markdown support, I was chatting with Enrique, like, is there something I can do to like pass a file or paste a file into the editor and see things render, and like, you know, like if something has an error, we know that this content type isn't supported yet. Obviously, there's much more automated ways to do this and much better ways to do this, and that sounds like the right approach.
Yeah, currently we do a lot. This is more about taking it to the next level of enforcing the backend doesn't regress anymore, like the thing that actually generates the GitLab flavored markdown, that can never change unless it's completely intentional, and changing the golden master as well.
Awesome. We're at the end of the agenda and 5 minutes from the end of our schedule, but
I don't know if it's in the recording or not, belongs in the recording, but I had questions about the things that are unassigned on the board. When in the process are they going to be assigned to people, and how?
Seems like we have a volunteer.
Just assign them all to you, Chad. Oh, okay, so like a lot of the unassigned ones are the sidebar refactor stuff, so that's all Fran. So just everything that's unassigned, just give it to Fran. That's my goal.
With the sidebar group refactor, I had assigned the first one on the list, but I just didn't want Fran to be like spam, 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 spam. So I just assigned another available to pick up.
There are a couple here. It looks like I think that we're stretched maybe on our on our spreadsheet that look like they're probably meant for Paul because they're related to some CSS in the top nav. And then there's a security issue that's unassigned. So yeah, I think we need to round those out a little bit. But when in doubt, I just assign Fran.
Thanks, Chad, for the heads up on that one. I'll go through
No. And also I'm noticing how few I have assigned to me. And I know that was probably intentional on your part, as I seem to spend most of my days on spam or dev fires nowadays, but hopefully I can get to do some.
Oh, well, probably one of the ones that's not assigned to you, because we're still refining it, is we would like you to work on the Embedding Snippets MVC on the content editor. Since,
right.
yeah, since you helped me so much iterating and refining and breaking down MVCs for the early static site editor work, I thought it'd be great to pair you up with Matthew in the internship process, so we can work on really scoping that MVC down, and then we'll loop in Enrique, and it's a great way to knowledge share for the content editor. So that's my hope for 14.2 in that effort. But that issue is still being refined, so it's probably not showing up on the board yet.
Ah, okay. One's being refined aren't on the board. Got it.
Let's see. Yeah, it doesn't have any labels on it, so it's not showing up on the board, but it's linked in the agenda above when I mentioned the MVC. I'm going to be providing feedback on the issue today and hopefully refine it a little further, but I'll ping you on the issue. We can start immediately or whenever you're ready, diving into it. So I think that would be that would be why it looks a little light on your side.
Besides, Chad, I talked yesterday with David, and I'm going to take 2 weeks in August. So I'm going to do as much as I can with the group sidebar refactor. And once I start my vacation, I will assign you some of those issues regarding the refactor.
Okay. And just the heads up, for those days, I'll be out too.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I have something to tell you, but I will tell you later in Slack.
When you phrase "I'm going to take 2 weeks," you got to be real careful that you don't say the wrong verb there and give 2 weeks instead, because it really sounds like you're giving your notice for quitting. Yes, you're taking 2 weeks of paid time off, which is very well deserved, and you should, but please return after that 2 weeks to come back and continue working for us.
If I feel okay, maybe I take more than 2 weeks.
You take as much time as you need.
It nearly sounds like you work only when you feel bad. It's like, if I feel okay, I will take more. That means when you work, you're not okay.
That's my best self.
Oh man.
Yeah.
I feel sorry for you. And we're still recording, right? Okay.
Yes.
No, I don't feel sorry for you, Fran. I don't feel sorry for you. No.
Okay.
Well, that wraps it up. Thanks everyone for your feedback and input on our milestone, and we will see you next week I think next week is the retro call, and yeah, otherwise I'll see you around in other various meetings and async issues throughout the week. Keep an eye out for the kickoff video. This is actually the first time we've had one of these team kickoff videos before I record my product kickoff video. So it's kind of nice to be able to practice kicking it off with you before I have to record that video. But that'll be coming this afternoon, so keep an eye out for that. Thanks again, everyone. See you soon.